service and the pledge. Give Mr. Janke a moment.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
For which it stands. That's like second grade.
Approval of the agenda is the next item on our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Gardner, is there support? I'll support it. Mr. Wareham, are there any additions, proposed deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is public comment. This will be the first of two. Anyone present who would like to address the board at this time, please bear in mind that this is a special meeting relative to township budgets. It is also in essence the second of two work sessions relative to our budgets for the coming fiscal year. The new fiscal year begins on Friday, April 1st for the township. Would anyone present like to address the board at this time? You will have up to 3 minutes. We would ask that you identify yourself prior to beginning to speak, and your time will begin once you begin speaking.
Horace Schmidt. I received an email from Kristen Lorty, which was addressed to all the board members, and it explained in there that there is a requirement, according to the Attorney General's opinion, that you would need to have a 30-day notice to all residents regarding the approval of the raises for the staff and also for any rate increases. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and hopefully that you'll be able to follow through on this as you go through this whole process. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Welcome. Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll close the first of the two public comment sessions. There will be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting, should you wish to offer additional comment or comment initially for the board's benefit. Item 5 on our agenda, budget work session. I'd like to begin with A, review amend township fees, rates, rents, et al. This is something that we began last week, and I'd like to bring the board up to date on a few things. We've been working at the staff level inside the office preparing updated material, much of which you will see in a draft version or updated version tomorrow. Chris, I believe you had something that you wanted to share this evening under updates relative to various items you've been working on. And I know that they're still under development, but take a moment or two to bring the board up to date.
Well, okay, the first thing that was questioned was, this is the breakdown of, if you look at, the number of people billed for Osceola Water, Mason Water, Mason Sewer, Tamarack City Water and Sewer. Tamarack City Sewer is about 20% of the total.
And do we know what that number is? I mean, we can figure out the number. Okay.
That's one of the items that came up at the last meeting. Also believe that there were a couple of other things that you were looking into and have under development. If I may ask you to provide just a little comment on those as well.
So this is going to different meeting. Okay, so the revenue sharing. If you look at the totals from the,
I believe you have the charts for these. I don't believe they're part of the package.
no,
so
yeah,
if you
no, I
kinda
I
share
printed
with
them off
me.
myself. So from where we were at the end of 2020 through what we got in the 21-22 fiscal year, we went up 2.4%, so we got an additional 4,135. We're projected to increase 3.5%, about 6,129 next year.
Was it 3 point what?
3.5. And so far, what they said, we're not done, with the previous fiscal year, but, they've been on with what they thought was gonna increase. Actually, I think we even got a little bit more than what they thought.
Okay.
So that's that. Oh, I printed the past due for both, Dollar Bay and Tamarack City. So Dollar Bay's total past due, $14,932.
We're talking about water here?
Water, yep. Tamarack City is $10,477.
Is there still a large one in there in Tamarack Cities, or did they catch up?
I mean, there's a couple. There's two that are over 1,000, one that's over 2,000. So
Is that
that's,
the one we were talking about?
the burnt house on, corner of Sixth Street.
And M26.
Oh, okay,
All but abandoned property with a firehouse.
right, but the Blythe one is taken care of.
That one I believe they completely took care of, yeah. As a matter of fact, no, they did, because, they're trying to sell it. So I have title companies doing search on it, and they had to get that.
They have no sign or nothing, that's what I was wondering.
Oh, okay. It might be sold. I mean, it might be like in the process,
Right,
so.
I mean, I never did see the sign, but they could've just done it themselves.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah.
So that's that.
It looks like the Horner one is pretty good shape right now.
Yeah, it's not too bad right now. I mean, it's over. They're behind two buildings, I would say, but
Yeah.
other than that, they're
Almost
not
got
too
these
bad.
commercials here, yeah.
Theirs is
I mean, I'm assuming
this one, and this one.
they have all
These
three of those.
Mhm. And that's like, this is 2 billings worth, or these are 2 billings worth. I'm sorry, did I point? It's this one, 351, 351.
And where's the store?
That's gotta be this one. That's what I think.
Yeah, yep.
But I mean, otherwise there's 2 residential ones on here. That's,
There's a couple that they stopped paying once COVID hit. They didn't pay anything.
they just stopped.
Mhm.
Alright.
Yep.
I mean, this one right here is obviously worse than the one on Main Street, and
Mhm.
that one, they don't even have an excuse for, so.
Or if they do, they haven't said
They haven't
anything
brought
about
to our
it.
attention, yeah.
Right. And then Laura's, no, that's not something where,
The contract,
yeah,
that will be distributed again for those that don't have
Okay.
it, and that's an action item for tomorrow.
okay, so I have her
Proposed agreement.
old one,
Yeah.
but we can talk about that later. I think that's everything I had for right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. A couple of items that I've been working on, just to bring you up to date, in the back of your packet is an updated draft, a worksheet relative to salary. We were talking about 5%, we were talking about 7% because of rates of inflation. That is intended to be a guide. It's a working draft of the document. We did agree to the 5% for planning purposes. We have not, I repeat, have not inserted any salaries or any increases at this moment into proposed budgets for next year. There's a very deliberate process that we will follow. It was alluded to by one of our guests during public comment. But we will follow MTA guidance relative to how we go about any type of increases. We will pass resolutions where applicable and appropriate, and I do not anticipate any formal action on salaries, hourly rates, or whatever until, at a minimum, our April meeting, which is on the 13th. And then, of course, they would not be effective for about a 4-week period, even if passed by the board for the fiscal year, so we can go through the community-based review process, again alluded to earlier. So, been following MTA guidance on this. I do have the reference manual here if anybody's interested. We proceed and go forward with that as we deliberate the budget in more detail tomorrow. In addition, we had a brief discussion about possible water system payment grace period. And I'm gonna share with you some fast points that I gathered based on the conversation to see if I'm on the right track. I've identified a potential time period of May 1st to September 6th, which is the Tuesday after Labor Day. The target would be residents and businesses with past due water bills. The resident or business shall apply for relief in writing on or before a select date, I arbitrarily put the 30th of April. Residential pay 75% of the past due balance by, again, a date to be determined, if we go forward with this, or agree to an individual payment plan. No interest would be charged for payment plan of 90 days or less. So if they have a short balance, and they can pay it off in 2 or 3 months, charging interest would be something that we could, I think, waive for that time period. Current late fees may be waived at the discretion of the township board. Residents and businesses must pay current bills on time each month, remain current for a 12-month period, or past due amount for forgiveness would be voided, and the full amount would be expected. And should a unique circumstance agreed to by the township occur for the resident and or business, they may ask for a pause of up to 60 days. The pause would in effect be added on at the end of the term. So if they had a 12-month term that we agreed to for payment of debt, and they needed a deposit for up to 60 days, those 2 months or 60 days would be added on the end, and the term would be 14 months versus 12 months, etc. It's my intent to review this with the township's attorney at a meeting that I'm trying to schedule in the very near future. I made a tentative call down there, but I talked to Pat's new aide, Pat Greeley's new aide on this. So I hope that I'm capturing what we discussed at the last meeting. The idea, it still makes sense. It's something that we could act upon going forward as we approve the budgets. But I think it's a way of recognizing the unique circumstances, but also letting residents know that we're willing to work with them. But the position of the township is you still owe money. We want to collect the vast majority of that. We want to do it quickly to get accounts squared and what have you. I arbitrarily put the percentage at 75%. If we look at, for example, the market that we identified, it's in the neighborhood of $1,600, 25% of that would be $400.
What's the pause you're talking about?
Well, let's say that I'm in arrears, and I meet all the criteria, and then the vehicle I'm driving, the transmission blows, and my cash position is, holy crap, I need the car for work, but if I'm paying a past due water bill, I can come in writing to the township, ask them for a grace period inside the grace period of up to 2 months, so I can get my vehicle fixed. Those 2 months would be added on to the end, so I still have to pay the bill as agreed to in the agreement we have, but instead of paying it off in 12 months, I've hit the pause button for 2 months and I'm paying it off in 14 months. So it's something that I've seen in other types of agreements where if something unusual happens and we agree it's beyond the resident's control, we could hold up on the arrears payment for a period of time until they get the other issue addressed and then go forward. So again, all of this is subject to board approval. These are just ideas that have been kicked around. I tried to start putting them down in writing so we have a document to look at and pick apart. By no means is this anything more than the roughest of rough drafts based on the conversation. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Thank you. Anybody else, questions, comments, sort of a quick overview of things that we looked at and have under development or reviewing or working through relative to our township fees? We have not discussed rents yet. We have an apartment that's open. We'd like to get that back under a rental agreement soon. Need more input from the board as to where we should set rates, et cetera. So I'll also be talking with our attorney about how we go about changing ordinance rates and timeframes to make sure we do that correctly. So the list of 3 items for discussion with Pat has grown to 6 or 7 over the last week. It does include, by the way, a proposed franchise agreement with the Berry Telephone Company as well for cable TV in the community of Dollar Bay only. Does not extend beyond that at this moment, as far as I know. Anybody have any questions, concerns, updates, or other items they would like to offer under 5 Part A? Moving on to Part B, amended FY 21-22 budgets, if applicable. These are still being fully flushed out. We're very close to having them done. In all likelihood, tomorrow you will be given copies of amended budgets for review and approval prior to our decisions on next year's budget. Next year's budgets will be based in large part, if not exclusively, on the amended budgets. You have an example in your packet. We approved an amendment to the Tamarack City budget a few months ago. The copy in your packet of budgets for the coming year is a draft. But the expenditures proposed and the revenues proposed match up. In the amendment we approved, they did not. They were off by, is it $130? I'm looking at Tracy and Krista for confirmation. And what we did is we looked at paperwork and we went through the process this morning trying to figure out what had happened, and we had inadvertently corrected or amended a budget that didn't match, and they have to match, if you will, above and below the line. The budgeted amount relative to expenditures has to match the revenue. So we arbitrarily, for next year's draft, put it into, I believe, audit expenses. Raising that figure by $130, so the budget you see in front of you for next year's draft matches. This year's amended budget will have to be approved at the board meeting tomorrow night. Does that make sense?
And
That's-
that
go ahead.
operating, money, that forwarded money, that 16,000
That's what I was
that
just
we
gonna ask about.
approved,
Please?
it's on the new budget that I printed you,
Thank
in
you.
your new
Yeah,
packets.
It's in that 20,000?
Yeah, I added it in there because we don't know where to put it, that's why it's
So-
got an asterisk.
I think we
Here,
have to.
We don't know what to do
I
with
think
it.
we're gonna have to do those journal entries for that, to put it in a previous year. So in that case, we wouldn't roll that forward, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's an expense incurred this year,
mhm,
and so we have to address ideally the cost this year.
right, but it's using money from a previous year.
It's bringing carry forward surplus revenue from the previous fiscal year into this fiscal year to address the cost. It's figuring out
I
exactly how we
don't
do it.
think, from what I'm seeing, I don't think we can do that. I think we have to take it, because it was from a previous fiscal year, we have to, it's not gonna count on this as revenue. That's what Christina would say.
Okay,
It's
I
not.
get, yeah, that's where, just from a personal standpoint, I'm a little perplexed, because any carry forward revenue
I
in
know.
past life was always the first source of revenue
I know.
in the new fiscal year. But now it ends up sort of in a holding pattern
Mhm.
until allocated in an appropriate manner. We may not need it in reality.
Mhm.
If we look at expenses, and expenses may not come to that point, but we're trying to figure out a way to appropriately address that issue.
Right.
And we're getting guidance from our auditors.
We need to find an accountant, so if any of you guys like have any insight on an accountant that handles these kind of questions, maybe? Cause Christina can't, she won't answer these questions.
Well, she can't. I
She
mean,
can't, cause she's our auditor.
And we used to go to Debbie Bradford.
Right, or
Um,
Jean Middleton or someone like that, they no longer will do our accounting. So a lot of these kind of questions, we have no one to ask, we have no one to do our W-2s, a lot of stuff that we need an accountant, basically. I am not an accountant.
I'm a very good friend, but I don't.
It's gotta be someone that's,
He's like here. I don't know
Right.
anything on.
someone that can do governmental type,
He does,
yeah, okay,
he does, county reps, I believe.
okay. Okay.
It's David, and I don't know if you know.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe we do need someone for small things throughout the year, but not in a monthly service, I guess, right? I mean, we don't use them monthly, but there are times when there's
I mean, the only
situations
thing we
and-
used them for was W-2s, right, like year end.
Yeah, year-end stuff and, yeah. So, we definitely need them.
More than anything, we want to make sure we do it
Yeah.
correctly. The
Yeah.
way we account for the revenue. But if we close out the fiscal year with sufficient revenue, which I believe we will, and cost not matching revenue, we may have enough money to address the cost
Mhm.
in the line, but we're not there yet. We won't know close out the year.
Who does our final analyzing budget?
Who does the final work?
Rookla,
Rookles, that's Christina,
Christina.
excuse me.
Oh, okay, that's who we're talking about.
Mhm.
And she's the one that prepares this.
And they
document.
used to do our year-end stuff, but they're cutting everything that's not
Cut
necessary
everybody, yeah.
because they don't have enough people
Yeah.
working there.
And just to refresh everyone's memory, Deb Bradford died in the not too distant past, and she was excellent,
Yeah.
understood all of
She
this,
was our
and was
go-to.
actually coming in and helping us learn how to meet all of the state criteria, and died shortly after, a second meeting with us, or something, a phone call and a meeting. and
Yeah.
then Not too long after became ill and died.
I think it was 2 months later,
Yeah.
hey?
Yeah,
We met in April and she
Yeah.
passed in June, I think.
so,
So there will be amended, to go back to the agenda,
Okay.
amended budgets available tomorrow evening for review. The adjustments are tiny, but it's still trying to get that question answered inside the water system. If we close out, as I said, with sufficient revenue and expenses below budget, we could be fine. And it could be a non-issue, but we're trying to anticipate both contingencies.
Mhm.
We don't need it, we do need it.
My opinion is budgets are a draft all the way up until
Tell the final,
they're
Tomorrow.
finalized. Yeah, right.
like
So-
for last year, right?
Yeah,
Right,
so,
exactly,
I mean,
They-
they're
Yeah.
changeable at any time.
right,
I don't see any reason why we have to be too worried about it.
Right.
They can be, as long as we get to the end and it's
It's addressed.
defensible and addressed, yes.
No, point well made. But we're alerting everybody to it and letting you know what we've been working on internally to try to address it. Work and development on 22-23 budgets. You have in your packet various budgets, all drafts. They do not show revenues other than on the budget line because there are no collections, of course, for next year. But they are virtually identical to this year's either amended and/or approved budgets. You have Tamarack City's at $122,660. I did mention the slight tweaking in the audit line 800, adding the $130 we found difference to next year's proposed draft budget. Osceola Township water is at 231,800. That is the amended budget for the current fiscal year. That identifies the operating, the revenue move forward, but if we don't need it, we won't utilize it. We'll have sufficient revenue generated by the water system to address costs.
So when we say the 16,000, just so I understand, is that just last year's move forward, or is that all-time move
Well,
forward?
no, the intent was to take last year's surplus as it's envisioned and move it into this year's budget. I think
So it's
we had
only last year's,
At
it's
this
not,
moment, it
not,
appears to be enough, yeah.
it's not the overall
It's-
surplus,
it's-
shall we say?
If it's needed, it would go back another year for surplus, but right now, again, the figure is.
I mean, there could be 10 years of surplus there, and I
Well,
would,
There is.
you know, I don't know what the number is, but
That's what we're hopeful of getting more specifically.
40
on-
years, I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Excuse me, out of the audit. That should give us a more precise figure. We've been asking for that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to discern in the budget, just how much the surplus is.
But we moved an arbitrary amount forward based on what we think it is from last year's, is that, that's what I'm
Yeah, we
understanding.
moved an amount
I know you guys
forward.
went over it, but I'm just trying to make sure I understood what you said.
Yeah, it appears arbitrary. The reality is that it was the amount necessary to tweak the expense lines to cover the cost of the goosenecks and related work that we did on Elm Street. Because we went from the planned 5 to 8 or 9 goosenecks. The cost was spread out across the appropriate lines, but what it did is it inflated our costs against budget by $16,000. So we had to put the revenue stream in, and it looked like we had sufficient carry forward revenue to address it that way. But your point a moment ago is on target. It may go back a little further, or it may not be necessary at all, depending on what our total.
So we
revenue
could
is.
lower an expense side, but we assume that our expenses are gonna be the same, is that what we're saying
Yeah,
here?
exactly,
So,
because we don't know what our revenue looks like, and the recommendation from MTA is in essence use
alright, I got it, okay.
the current year's projected, because we haven't closed out the year yet, because our budgets need to be approved by the 1st of April.
I understand that,
That's the
I
dilemma.
just wanted to make sure I had a handle on what you guys.
You're right on target.
Picking up what you guys are putting down.
Thank you. You got it.
So to speak.
Tracy and Krista really have worked on the township budget. 288.4, there's adjustments that are in your draft. Again, it looks not quite identical to what we started off with this year, because ours was 28.1, I think, on the expense side. We had to move some resources around or identify some costs around to get the numbers to match up above and below, and I know two of them were working on it when the lunch hour appeared, and you two are in a far better position to explain what transpired than I am.
So this,
I can read in.
2881 it was.
Yeah. If I can add a footnote, it does not reflect any additional costs above what the costs were when we started this year. It doesn't have any salaries into it that might be increased, any hourly rates, none of that. It has nothing on the expense side identified, only the budget figures going into next year. And it's in essence a continuation, approximation of the current year budget. It will change by April 13th.
so, in the previous year's budget, the number of line items are way more.
Yep.
Is this just a result of some of those being pared back too, or
Mhm.
saying we don't need those, we put them in different, we combined some things here?
That's part of it, yeah. And let me give you, for instance, on the budget side, up above expenses, you look at revenue sharing, it's at 155. We already know that revenue sharing is close to 200,000 in the current year, and it's going higher for next year. It's just that we don't have an absolute figure, and because we haven't put expenses in or approved anything around hourly rates or salaries or anything yet, we're simply presenting a budget that will be the template for all of the changes we'll make to it after the new fiscal year begins, but it will allow us to meet the expectation that our budgets will be completed and approved going into next year before this fiscal year ends.
So did we make on this one right here, we made the changes that we were talking about in terms of our updated revenue that we think we're going to have?
No, not yet. That'll happen before the meeting on the 13th.
This would be revised again to reflect the
Yeah.
the number that you just gave us,
Mhm.
the extra 6,000 or whatever.
Yep.
And then, alright.
Another example, Aaron, I think on a smaller scale is there's a charter communications franchise fee at 12.1. And I think franchise fees have jumped up a little bit this year. A cost
For
standpoint.
the revenue part.
Yeah, for the revenue part.
And obviously, I would assume that this new, you know, the new one that we're talking about is gonna be, we would match whatever the franchise fee is for, isn't it a percentage
Yeah,
based?
it's a percentage, 1 to 5 in law, we're at 3% with charter or spectrum right now. I'm assuming based
So
on.
I'm assuming we would just match whatever the
Yeah.
charter one is. I mean, there would be no reason to treat one different than the other.
If we approve it going forward and we set the franchise rate at 3%, we would collect 3% on the
I mean,
church. Yeah.
you would think that in the end that the total would probably be similar because one is probably gonna steal the other one's customers, so that in the end, possibly could even out anyways.
They may not charge as much in the aggregate as Spectrum does. So the
Yeah.
amount of money collected may be
They're
smaller.
not gonna have as many customers right away.
Yeah.
Because they're not taking
No.
on, they're
I
not
mean,
taking on time like they're just.
I would think that right now Spectrum's biggest reason to even have cable right now is for their internet, so, I mean, it's not for the TV service.
So you're actually gonna end up, if you do go with the other, you're gonna have to for a little while.
have the impact of lowering over time Spectrum's rates. If the competition is appreciably lower with a comparable service, they're gonna have to adjust their rates. Or one would think they would. So, but we don't have that factored in here at all because we haven't approved the franchise yet.
That's fine, yeah, okay.
So, there's a number of variables out there, and just pointing out a few of them, you identified the one for revenue sharing again, so. Behind that one is the, if you will, the road fund. The road fund figures are the start figures for this year, they do not include expenditures. And those figures are not even good estimates, they are what we started the current fiscal year with. We know that there were significant expenditures all across the system, but we don't have those factored in yet for next year, because we don't have any expenses anticipated yet for next year. So we'll adjust this. We also don't have a chart yet that shows this year's revenue in their totality that were collected in the winter taxes, do we? Do we have that number?
That's all there, that's the total,
That's in these figures
correct.
as a revenue?
Mhm.
Oh geez, then I
That's
stand,
everything,
I stand corrected
but that's not what I'll collect next winter,
next winter.
if that's not included.
Okay, then I stand corrected. We've got.
I don't know why this budget's like that, it doesn't, it carries everything forward.
Okay,
So this is like actually what's in District 1, 2, and 4
at this
to
moment.
spend, correct.
Oh geez, I stand corrected, thank you.
It's
We're-
the only budget we have that does that.
So the expenses for last year have already
What's
been taken care of back
It
out
like
of this,
rolls
and this
them
is
up
what we
forward.
have new.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how
but
can we
it's
do that?
starting, I don't know.
Holy shnikes.
That's why we need it.
Oh, yeah, I apologize for the misinformation stated a moment ago. I had assumed that because we show no expenses on the report, that this was really just the start of last year's budget figures. They look comparable to what we started off with last year. But that we collected that much revenue that we just about covered all our expenses then. Okay, that's an even
I
better
could do a
position.
forecast of what I'll collect next year, cause that's all collected before the end of the fiscal year anyway, and add it to that to show, reflect.
This makes meeting with the road commission a whole lot easier, close to $400,000 available. We're in discussions, just a sidebar, with Franklin Township about Unico Road. And I'm following up on that on Thursday with Mary Sears about some type of partnership potentially to do with Unico Road. Franklin and, us, getting from highway to the township line, and then us looking at what we can do going in from there.
Cool.
You did say something about having to vote on this again, when we were talking earlier, road fund? That's something that's,
Putting it on the ballot.
Yeah, yep.
did you wanna mention that now?
Yeah, our road millage ends before, like this tax year I'll collect it, it'll be done before next tax year. So and there's no elections next year, well, potentially no elections, so we're looking at putting it on the ballot this year, as a renewal.
So we don't have to have a special one next year.
Probably should. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Maintain the millage that we have.
We'll have to, approve it at the meeting, in April, because if we want it on the August ballot, we have to have the language approved by the end of April, so. Otherwise, we have till August to get it on the November ballot.
We have to make a decision one way or another on the 13th to defer to the November election, or to try to wedge it into the primary. And address it in August.
The Unico they're doing from the highway to that first corner.
It would be what would have been previously paid down to Old County Road, I believe it is, or very close to it.
Yeah, I know where that.
So coming in from 41, the first several hundred feet along the Franklin Township.
That's good.
Several hundred.
I think we only want to the top of the hill.
Yeah, that's why I wanna sit down and meet with them, because I'd
I'd like to see them.
Yeah, where that township line
Bob,
is
you're
an
good.
open question. I think it's further down over the crest, they think, no, it's on the other side of the hill, I'm going, no, there's gotta be a line in here that we all agree on.
Yeah, and I think it's right on top, because right where the Chevy road starts is Franklin.
Yeah, thank you, I wasn't gonna be quite that dramatic or graphic, but I'm not gonna argue with you because you're right. Anyway, that's the road fund then. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
You stand corrected.
but you don't, but
That is good news.
I shouldn't add what I'm gonna collect next tax season, right? Because that
No,
won't
I
be
know.
available to
Yeah.
spend until next summer.
Yeah, what you have identified are the resources by precinct that we have available for the current year,
Mhm.
just out of the road.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Got it. I feel like I found money. I've been operating under the premise that no, oh, that's really good news. You have a fire department budget from Tamarack City that differs from what you saw earlier. This is the recommendation coming up from the fire department, again, stuff that we will look at and approve, we discuss now, but we'll approve tomorrow. We're hopeful of having dollar bays between now and tomorrow's meeting. And I know that Tracy and Krista can track down.
Hope so.
What's this?
That's the,
That's last year.
it's basically last year's, we just haven't gotten an updated one from them
Oh,
to
yeah.
know
Yeah,
if
that's what
there's
I mean,
any.
yeah, that's why I
I-
went with Zach's, and made passing reference to this,
Okay.
but this
Like,
is.
we didn't update the spreadsheet for Tamarack City today,
Do we know,
but Tracy's
like,
gonna,
we didn't keep track of any expenses for this, do we? So
we
don't-
can quickly find it out though.
I mean, if something was way off.
Yeah.
yes.
No, we're gonna go, I
I'm
intended to
sure
go
Brad
up
would wanna
and-
know if there was something way off, otherwise I would.
Cause
say
I
there's
don't
no-
think this interest is right, I think it's probably 140, not 1,400. So there's and the special assessment revenue is also probably off by a little bit, so I'm gonna recalculate that and figure that out too. But it'll be done by tomorrow.
Yeah, I apologize for not having them in order, I had this at the back of my packet, but.
These ones, we were kinda like at the last minute, like, oh,
Fine.
whoops.
So do we have to have a, typically in here, we usually agree to a, maintain or change the rates for the fire departments, for the special assessment district.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, those are items to be addressed tomorrow, if I understand
Oh,
correctly,
yeah.
because we have the millages that we will be, that'll be on the table, so, and available for the public, should anyone come in. All of that information will be available tomorrow, at the budget meeting. So you have all three fire department budgets in there, and then the specific one submitted by Tamarack City to substitute for what's in this packet, ultimately for decision tomorrow, and we also hope to have dollar base in here for tomorrow. Questions, comments, concerns about this? Ideas, thoughts, issues that you think we need to address during our work session at this time?
I feel like the list of items was so much worse before, when I used to do this.
Oh God, we bid for all this,
So we went item by line to make sure that we were okay with things. And this, if this is all that's left, it's a good thing, I guess, but.
Mark does a lot more work than.
as long as we know exactly where they go.
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, this seems a little more,
But we're being smarter, not harder.
I like
these
it.
days.
yeah,
Whoa, good luck.
I like it.
Well,
We're streamlining.
two of the three in here are,
You are.
I stumble into walls in here.
So,
What,
okay.
What do you feel like we're missing?
No, I don't know, I just remember this big, it was sideways and man, it was line by line we went, you know, and it was many pages long. And we would spend 4 hours going through it.
Almost.
And,
Like this old one.
yeah, it was more like these, yeah.
well, things have been condensed down. There are lines that have disappeared over time. There are a lot of lines that were in budgets in the past that had zero revenue and zero expenditures by them, and some of them have been deleted. Nothing prevents us from adding things in or taking things out during the amendment process. In essence, what we're doing is, tomorrow we'll lay down these in whatever form the board chooses as the template for next year. And then we'll start tearing into it, as early as April as we look to amend. Go forward with everything from salaries to disbursements for road work, et
Is
cetera.
that revenue from the, what is it, ARPA or whatever it is
That
that,
COVID, none of that is reflected in these
okay,
budgets.
we're not gonna worry about that, we put it in, money out when the time comes, is that what we'll look
At
at that
this
like?
moment, the one thing I'm asking the board to consider is the distribution of the revenue by precinct. How it's utilized, would be a decision we would make down the road. But we don't even have to make that decision tomorrow. We can make that decision, as conditions warrant during the coming fiscal year. But we have $190,497, if memory serves me correctly. And there's a chart, I think, shared at the last meeting that divides it up by precinct, and that's as far as we've gone. It's an idea, none of it has been codified yet by the board.
And we don't have to till 2024.
Yeah, we have, all we have to do is send in a report at the end of April that we've got it and we're working on the plan in essence.
And that we spent zero money.
And that we spent zero money. We've received half of it, I believe,
Half and then that little,
and a little bit from the townships that turned it down.
mhm.
Okay. So we still have roughly 49% of the revenue coming in. Also, none of this reflects any anticipated infrastructure money, new grants, what might be available, for rec purposes. We're into the second cycle now, for example, with the Portage Health Foundation. And, looking at, but we need work, pick one project, we're talking about a dog park. Our baseball field is gonna be utilized in all likelihood by Lake Linden again, I think we've adopted that, request, or approved that request. We need to do, some work to look at, the Gooseneck Park to see how big a dog park we can put up there, what it's gonna need. And there's another funding cycle available from Portage Health right now for small grants for health purposes. So, plus the DNR has rec money, and I've got all kinds of notes and whatever from conversations. And if you'll permit me 30 more seconds, I spent some time in here before the deadline of the last Portage Health application, working on it, got through it, answered about half the questions, felt comfortable. And when I got done Sunday morning before it was due and looked at it, I said, if I read this, I wouldn't fund it, and I just got done writing it. So I took a deep breath, stepped back and said, well, their next funding cycle's already begun. We'll just keep moving forward, and we've got a workable plan, we've got a good idea, a workable plan, we'll submit an application that has a higher certainty of funding. So, continuing to work on that one. Any questions, comments, concerns about any of these budgets? Is everybody comfortable then going forward tomorrow with discussions on the amendments for this year, improving the budgets for next year? Okay. Am I safe in saying that we've concluded our discussion relative to the budgets for next year for today? And we will meet again at 5:15 tomorrow. Public hearing beginning at that time on the proposed budgets. This information will again be available along with other supportive documentation that we can complete between now and then for the public and the board's consideration. We will convene the public hearing at 5:15 and the board meeting will follow shortly thereafter to approve the budgets for next year. Everybody accepting that as the plan?
Yep.
Okay. With no other business then to come before the work group at this time, or the board working in special session, I should say. There's a second opportunity for public comment. Looking at people present, we'll ask again if anybody would like to offer comment for the board's consideration. At this time, you will have up to 3 minutes. Please identify yourself and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Horace Schmidt, I have 3 clarification questions. When Krista started out at the beginning, she said she collected things and then came up with a 20%, and I didn't catch what it was all about.
It's, the percentage of of the total utilities that are billed, 20% of it is the Tamarack City Sewer.
Oh, I see. Okay, good, thank you. And then the, Mark, on the past due water proposal, the person has 12 months to pay off the 75% that they negotiate with the township, is that correct?
The idea, and that's all it is at this time,
Yeah.
in draft form, is that the resident or business shall pay 75% of the past due amount.
Okay,
The expectation is that they would pay that immediately.
yeah,
If however they cannot, they would be given the latitude to enter into a payment schedule of that amount separate and distinct from their regular water bill for a period of up to 12 months.
okay,
So if you have a very sizable amount due, it might be easier for you to say, oh, can I pay this off in 6 months? And as long as they meet all the criteria, including staying current, that is something that we would probably give them permission to do.
and then your proposal for hardship, period of 2 months, that means that the person would not have to pay the past due amount, but they would have to pay their current bills that they get each month.
That's, I think, an apt way to phrase that. I think you're absolutely correct on that. It would affect only the past due amount under hardship. There's an expectation that people who enter into this would stay current and remain current throughout the entire process, and then for 12 months thereafter. And if they do not, in that, even that 12-month period after they paid everything back, if they are late once, then it's a default position back to owing the balance that we had waived or forgiven.
Okay. So, if they pay, if they don't pay their current water bill, does that affect the agreement?
Well, if they don't pay their current water bill, the current agreement is void.
Okay, that's what I was checking. All right.
But remember, this is an idea in
No,
draft form.
that's why I used
Yeah.
the word
Yeah.
proposal, that's
Yep.
why I didn't assume that was in place.
And I appreciate the dialogue, Horst, because you're identifying things that need tweaking to make them clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the last question is, I see the general, Osceola Township profit and loss budget. Will there be a large, major, full budget that includes the fire department, road fund and utilities in as a final budget? Will those remain separate, when you're passing the budget? Am I clear, or is
The
there?
fire department budgets, I'm seeking are standalone budgets. They're not incorporated into the township budget. The township.
Not
general-
incorporated in the general.
General
township.
budget of the township.
They are a part of the township budget, but they are
Yeah.
not a part of the general
The
budget.
general budget for the township is a standalone budget, the operation of the township itself. But Aaron's absolutely right, they're part of the overall costs associated with the township.
Okay, so then the utilities and the fire departments and the road funds remain separate, budget entities, is that correct? As you pass.
I didn't hear the question.
Sorry.
No, it's comparable, I think, to the fire departments, isn't it? They're
What's
all
that?
part of the overall township cost.
They
but
are.
These are separate, distinct budgets within the township makeup.
Okay.
The water system in Tamarack City is expected to be self-supporting.
Mhm.
It does not draw other revenue from the township, am I correct on that?
Correct.
So that budget,
I mean, it could if it had to, but, I mean, it's not that you can't subsidize one of those budgets with general fund money, you can, but you don't want to. Because the general fund money has got a limited source of revenue.
Okay. All
So
right.
the way it's split in here, like Tamarack City Water, Osceola Water, General, Road Fund, the 3 fire departments, and we'll have the Mason wastewater fund too. They're all
Okay.
separate and distinct, have their own budgets,
Own revenue
with
sources.
their own revenue sources.
Okay, good, I just thought I'd check. Thank you.
they have different requirements within them as well to identify. But they're all, when the township is audited, all of those unique budgets are audited as part of the township. Is that, am I correct in that?
Mhm.
Okay, so, yeah, when you go through our audit, all of those subsets are identified in the audit,
Mhm.
and they're part of the township's overall costs and revenues. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, it clarifies
I think I'm correct in
everything.
that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm 3 out of 5. So. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? like to address the board? You'll have up to 3 minutes. Anyone? Hearing none, we'll close the second public comment session for
I got
today's
two
meeting.
questions here. Can I make a quick two questions?
No.
Did Bob get a chance to look at the water budgets by any chance? Have you had any chance at all, or are you just getting back like yesterday?
No, I haven't looked at it.
Okay.
I don't, you know,
Sometimes
I
you
said
used to look at
before.
those, I don't know if it matters though, I mean, that's fine. The other thing that I have is, people who stop paying for COVID, is there something that's coming for them? Or what makes them think that it's okay to just stop paying and then not pay anymore? I mean, is there something that's coming to help and save them, or what? Are they just expecting us to save them? I guess I'm just wondering.
People made more money on COVID than they did when they
Yeah,
were
I'm not
working,
buying
so
it.
why did you stop paying your bills?
We already,
Their money that was coming to save them is in the form of $600 a month of federal funds.
Right.
That money was already there to save them, I don't understand.
I don't know if you remember, we had entered into agreement with Community Action.
Right.
And they covered huge portions of people's
Yes.
water bills due to COVID.
So
They
the
had special
money
funding.
that was there to save people is already
It's gone.
Come
gone.
and gone, as far as I
So
know.
these people that have $1,500 in bills that just stopped because of COVID, there's no more money coming to save those people.
No,
Are those the kind of people we're gonna offer this 75% up to, or how are we? Is that what you're leaning towards on that, or is it just the people like, good standing people like the, Corner and Richie's, for instance?
That's an excellent point. At this moment, the draft makes no distinction. On the other hand, it's a draft of an idea, and we could certainly make the distinction, if that's the board's pleasure. We could point out that there are customers that opted not to pay for whatever reason during the pandemic. There's no additional funding for relief of that. We could say that they don't have the latitude to come into this system. They simply opted not to pay their bill, if I'm understanding you correctly. So we could set a different condition or a subset of conditions.
Okay, I'm just curious as to, I guess part of that is taken care of by the fact that you say you have to start paying your bill now.
Yeah.
And if you don't stay in good standing, then this goes away, so I guess that does take care of part of that, I guess. There is some incentive to continue, to start paying your bill, which they're not doing right now.
If it's COVID related because they lost their source of income with a loved one or something, then you can kind of lean their way a little bit, you know, so.
Right.
You don't know the circumstances behind it,
Right.
that's the hard part.
Okay.
So I won't take
That
that.
makes an excellent
Right.
point. Yeah.
Right.
They're both excellent points. Our ordinance allows us discretion on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
So I think we, to some degree, captured this in the discussion and the
The
notice.
written summary might help with some of that, or something, I think you said something about some kind of a write-up for the request.
Right.
The request portion of
Right.
that may help with some of that portion of it.
They need to explain why we should consider them for relief.
Correct, it's not an automatic, okay, all right, that answers my questions, I guess, for now.
Anything else? Aaron, thank you. Does anybody else have anything we need to discuss relative to the budgets and revenue at this time? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn the township special budget meeting is in order.
Move.
Mr. Janke? Moved, Gardner supported, motion to adjourn. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, we stand adjourned.